have to think about what is your guiding light? What is guiding you? Why are you doing what you're doing? And if you have a good why, and if you're serving God's will, all the rest of it comes automatically.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Immigrant Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Avishkar Sabharwal, the Immigrant Doctor. I have with me a phenomenal guest, guys. So I want to introduce you guys to Pavan Agarwal. We actually met at a party that he was hosting, and we kind of connected and jived. Amazing guy, amazing visionary. He started a few companies, and now his latest project is AngelAi. We're going to dive into all of that. The reason why I wanted to bring him on was a lot of us are W-2 earners, and we're trying to find these side hustles. We're trying to find these side ways of creating value, generating more income. And I wanted to bring a different perspective because he is an entrepreneur at heart, very, very successful. And so I was like, let's just dive into his journey and see if we can pick up a few nuggets from there. So welcome, Pavan. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Avishkar. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun meeting you. I mean, you came at the best time. So definitely with Bitcoin soaring above 90,000 now. And I think there's still a lot more to go. So it's not like you missed the boat. I think it's a long way to go. My daughter bought one Bitcoin when it was at 5,000 a couple of years ago.
Oh, really? Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah. So, and I said, 5,000. I said, you're wasting money. I said, okay, well, go ahead, kid. See, have some fun, right? And now she's laughing at me. She said, I should have bought more.
No, that's true. Let's dive into your journey, Pavan. I think it's going to be fun to hear because you come from the mortgage space and you've kind of evolved, as a lot of times happens in the entrepreneurial journey, right? You kind of connect your existing dots and you find new pieces around you and you connect and you create something new. So let's start with your mortgage journey. How did that start? What got you into this business?
Yeah, I want to back up for a minute and comment on finding new pieces and connecting them together. That part actually is really easy as long as you have a good compass. You have to think about what is your guiding light. What is guiding you? Why are you doing what you're doing? Okay, and if you have a good why, and if you're serving God's will, all the rest of it comes automatically. Okay, so now obviously depending on your faith, the God's will has a broad definition, right? But I think all of us have an inner voice. If you really meditate, if you really spend time being calm and introspective, you can hear that voice and you know what you're supposed to do and you know what direction you're supposed to go. And it's always, rule of thumb, it's always the hardest direction. It's always what makes you the most uncomfortable is what you're supposed to do. And when you're doing that and you understand your why and you understand your true mission, like all of the interconnections and everything that happens will happen automatically. So it isn't a race for wealth. It isn't a race for having the most employees, the biggest organization or whatever. It's a race for completing your mission. Right? So you want to understand, figure out what that is, and you want to get that mission completed. And you can do that with one employee and $1 or a million employees and a couple of $1 trillion. It doesn't matter. As long as whatever that mission is you complete, because if you don't, you're going to have to come back and continue it.
No, that's true. And I think, a lot of times, especially in social media and everything, you'll see people flashing these fancy cars and this and that. And you're exactly the opposite of that. I mean, a guy who's of your caliber and, very simple living, but it's all about the mission. And I think at a certain point, what happens is, yes, wealth is important, but at a certain point, the mission becomes way more than, once you have your basic needs met, it becomes way more important than the money that comes in. That just becomes a byproduct of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the people, flashing the fancy cars and all that on social media, I mean, they're performers, right? You're acting on stage, and that's how they're getting the clicks. I mean, that's their business. So I can't fault them for it. It's what you do, right? So, actor has to act the part. Right? It's not a requirement of me. If it was a requirement of me to meet my mission, I would be doing that. but it's not a requirement. So don't get distracted. Don't try to copy somebody else's approach, somebody else's style, because they're on their own path and you're on your own path. And so you got to figure out what is the most efficient, effective way to get to where you want to go. So I know I digress from your original question. Let me just tell you the story of like how I got here, how I figured it out. So I mean, I can tell you, as a kid, I was a kid that tore apart every gadget in the house to figure out how it worked. Every toy, the first thing I did was to get a screwdriver to it and break it apart to see how it worked, right? And whether from the simplest thing like a knife, I took a 6 years old, I took a magnifying glass to inspect the edge of a knife and say, okay, how does this thing work and why is it sharp? Right? Trying to understand the material and how, so like that's what I am, right? And so I'm just naturally inquisitive and trying to figure everything out, right? And so the family history is, so we immigrated to this country in the early 70s. It was Gerald Ford was president.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was yes. Yeah, we went from Ford to Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter was at that time very bad for us. It felt bad, but in the long run, it ended up being really good because inflation went sky high, and we had a lot of real estate because my parents got into real estate, and we literally came to this country with $100, right? Because that's all, as you might know. When you left India at that time, all you were allowed to, only amount of foreign exchange you're allowed to convert was $100. So
Yeah.
literally had $100. And fortunately, by good luck and whatever, by chance, my parents got into real estate. They started buying real estate, and accumulated a portfolio through the 70s. And that with inflation, real estate is the best hedge for inflation. And that portfolio exploded in value over the years. Then in 1980, exactly August 1980, my father said, you know what, why don't we start financing our stuff ourselves, our deals ourselves. So we started the mortgage company and it started finance. And then I was like, 11, 12 years old. I started working with him at that age. So, and then, it's all manual, right? The whole process is especially in the 80s. I mean, nobody really had a PC yet. Yeah, the Apple II had just come out or something like that. And so it was all manual. And so my dad said, hey, why don't you write this program that will do this, something called an APR calculation. And so that I could save a lot of money on every deal, because I have to right now send it to a third-party service bureau and send it back, and the whole transaction cost took 3 days, and it cost like $200 in 1980 money, right? It's a lot of money.
Right.
Right. So I said, okay. So it was a math problem because I had to invert a polynomial. But anyways, I did it, and then I just kept writing code for the industry since then, and been building upon that knowledge. And I wrote my first AI program in 1985, and I used something called Borland. I don't know if you remember this old company. They were a competitor of Microsoft back in the day called Borland, and they came out with something called Prolog, which was a basic AI system. I wrote basic software on reviewing underwriting data, and my conclusion on that was, this is like really time consuming and takes so much to make it useful. I would need a huge amount of data, right? And a huge amount of labor to organize it all. And that was a time when a 20 megabyte hard disk cost $1,000. And I was like, okay, this is not practical. So I put it aside. And then after that, I went to engineering school. I studied electrical engineering and took a number of classes in machine learning back then. And all the algorithms are basically the same from then and now. Obviously, the milestone paper that has changed everything in artificial intelligence was in 2016, 2017, with Google's paper, attention is all you need. Anybody listening wants to understand, that was the breakthrough paper. So it's called Attention is All You Need. It was Google researchers, 2017 or something, published that paper, and that's what makes ChatGPT and LLMs possible today. So when you get a chance, take a look at that. But the rest of the science behind artificial intelligence is still the same. In fact, the science, attention is all you need is really a optimization of creating a language neural net. Okay, it basically says you don't need to track all this other stuff. You just keep track of what's important in the language, and that's sufficient to achieve your goals. Okay, so what I did was basically since that time, since the mid '80s till now, I built everything in the mortgage finance banking system. I've been building these systems since then, but I designed it so that all the data was properly organized, and all the causal, cause and effect, all the causal relationships are kept in the database and kept in a usable manner, right? And at that point, I didn't know how I was going to use it. I knew I was going to use it for a neural net, for an artificial intelligence, but I didn't. It was fuzzy in my head actually how it would end up, the final neural net, how it would end up working. But I did know I needed the data. I needed the causality stored, right? So remember, in artificial intelligence, it's not simply you need lots of data. That's because there's lots of data everywhere, right? And why are some companies like Tesla, why are they so valuable, is because they don't just have data, but they have the causality, they have the relationships between data, right? And that's why they're multi-trillion-dollar companies. Okay, so same thing here. So I started maintaining a causality database for financial services, and no one's ever done that. So I maintained that. And then I innovated and created some interesting machine learning algorithms in the 90s that were actually remarkably simple and remarkably unique. And I'm still shocked that no one has come up with this yet, still to this day. Basically, the idea of these algorithms is like, in your personal finances, you have so many data points that define you as a financial entity, as your financial profile, right? And all of these different data points are interrelated. So, and if you change one, like let's say you change your income, or you change your job, or you change the number of years you've been employed or something, right? And you change one, it has an effect on 100 other things, right? So this algorithm basically learns these kinds of relationships and automatically adjusts. So when you change one thing here, right, and if you imagine a three-dimensional grid, a three-dimensional terrain, right, if you pull the bed sheet down here, right, and then it's going to move the rest of the sheet somewhere else, right? And you need to be able to figure out, if I pull it here, what's going to happen to the rest of this thing, right? So that's what the algorithm does. You make one change here, and it instantaneously adjusts the whole fabric of your profile. Okay, so I created the algorithm in the early 90s, and that is still at the core of our engine. Okay, and then I've been working on, I was working on a natural language implementation interface for this. I said, it was like maybe 2010 or something, or earlier than that. I figured out that I said, you know what, the best way for human beings to communicate with an application, especially a financial application, is through natural language. They want to talk to it. So we started messing around with natural language interfaces, so that if you want to apply for insurance, or apply for a mortgage, or open a bank account, the most convenient thing for you to do is to say, I want to open a bank account. Or I want auto insurance. And then you want to say, what does it cost? What's the premium? You want to just be able to have a conversation. So I started working on ways to implement that. And we rolled out the fully working product in 2018, end of 2018. That was version 1.0. And then since 2018 to today, we've done over 200,000 transactions through it. Over $30 billion
wow.
of financing have gone through it. And if you look at the version today, the production version today versus the initial, prototype in 2018, you won't recognize it, other than unless you know the code behind it. The core is the same, but the whole experience is greatly upgraded. So that's the whole story. So and taking it full circle, my why do I do this, and why am I so passionate about it? It's something I learned from my father as he ran real estate and finance, because he saw, as a real estate agent, as a loan provider, he saw too much discrimination. It was rampant. He saw people who needed it, especially in the Black community, that they didn't get the financing. The loan officers weren't available. People just didn't pay attention to them. And he said, this is not right. So his whole focus, the whole DNA of our financial, institution is our lending practices is get people the money they deserve, right? And the money they can afford. More than just deserve, but if you can afford it, you should get it. Right? And everyone should have access to these government-sponsored products. To the credit of the government, they've done a good job of setting up a system that can get the money out to those who need it the most. Okay, the problem is in the middle. There's you have a directive up here, then it goes through all of these hands before it gets to the consumer, right? And all these hands in the middle, they're motivated by self-interest, and they don't necessarily act in the best interest of the consumer. Okay, so the money doesn't always go to where it needs, where the government wants it to go, right? Or where public policy, what is right for public policy, doesn't necessarily happen. It's better than not having that public policy, because it'd be even worse. But you get a lot of leakage, a lot of wastage. So $1 coming from the top in DC, and maybe 1 penny gets to the end customer, right? But it still at least is 1 penny. So the system keeps moving forward. So as I learned all of this, and I'm building all this technology, I say, you know what? All of these hands that this money has to be washed through, and those hands are acting in their self-interest. They're not acting in the interest of the consumer. Now, if there was a robot there instead, okay, and the robot is only trained to act in the interest of the consumer, okay, then the money, then $1 from the government gets to, that full dollar gets to the consumer. Okay, and that's the point of AngelAi. That's the point of the AI that we build, is we can eliminate all those hands, and the consumer can directly talk to the AI, right? AI doesn't make any commission, right? A bank officer works on commission,
Yeah.
True fact. Bank officer works on commission. A bank officer is thinking more about his commission than he's thinking about you. All he cares about is how much commission am I going to make this month. That's his number one priority, right? There's a bank officer, investment banker, anybody on Wall Street, so on. And we all saw in 2008, if you watch the hearings, on the Hill, about the meltdown, and they had, they marched all these different investment bankers up there, from Goldman Sachs to Lehman Brothers to whoever, and there's all this talk. Ben Bernanke, who was the Fed chairman back then, and Hank Paulson, there was all this talk about executive pay. They used a euphemism called executive pay, right? And they said there's something wrong with executive pay. Well, what they're really saying is there's all of these, they're saying it in a nice way, and you see like how, because these are all of these people, right? Like Hank Paulson, he's from Goldman Sachs himself, right? And now he's working for the government, right? And so all these people are part of the culture, right? They're still protecting their friends, right? If what they should have said, hey, public, did you know that these guys get paid commission, right? And they make lots of money on commission on selling you stuff. And that's why they make tens of millions, $100 millions, because it's pure commission, and they don't carry any of the risk, right? And they don't carry your risk, and they don't carry the risk to the bondholder. They just they're middlemen. They make a bunch of commission on you, right? They're basically investment bankers are used car salesmen with a nice suit and a nice smile and a Harvard degree, but they're still used car salesmen because they don't give a shit. They literally, all they care about is how much is my year-end bonus going to be. Right? When you get in the bars with them and you're sitting there and you're talking with them, all they give a shit about is what's my bonus going to be at the end of the year. But it really boils down to it. And some of my friends will be listening to this, and they're going to be really mad at me right now. But spoiler alert: this is how the investment banking world works. I've been moving around investment banking for a long time, And they're the, investment bankers, I mean, they're the biggest effing babies in the world. They're happy to go destroy somebody else, right? And they'll destroy another company or whatever. They love destroying other people. But if their bonus gets hit by even a penny, they just end up crying. The big crybabies, right? They're crooks and they're crybabies. Sorry, guys. Sorry, all my friends on Wall Street, but this is how I feel about you.
Well, I think, it boils down to what value you're creating for the society, right? At the end of the day, yes, money is important, but I think, like, for example, with AngelAi, the value that AngelAi creates for the society is it takes away all of these middlemen in between, right? And it kind of simplifies the process for people. I mean, I tried using it when we were sitting for dinner. I was like, okay, let's check this out. I tried using it. And by the way, people should try and use it. It's free to use. Go to the website and you can use it. And it gives you a pretty accurate, simple to understand response, which is very important because a lot of times what happens is in the financial industry, we use a lot of financial jargon. Like, I'm a physician, I use a lot of medical jargon, and when I'm talking to my colleagues, that's fine, but if I'm talking to a patient, I got to simplify the language. And I think what AngelAi does is it really simplifies the language for people to actually understand, okay, this is what's actually happening, this is how it goes.
Well, hey, I have a question for you since you're a physician. How do you feel about RFK coming in as the new FDA, as the head of the FDA?
I stay out of politics because I think that's the best way to do it. I know there is some controversy around him, but like I said, I mean, I'm going to do the best I can for my patients, and whatever policies happen at the national level, I don't get myself involved in that at all.
But I mean, the FDA is like this overlord that doesn't necessarily let you do the best that is for your patient. They put all these rules, right? And I know, I've been around. I have enough friends who are doctors. I know the code words, right? I know when a doctor can't say something. He wants to say something to you, but he can't say it because if he did, it would risk his license, right?
Let's end it there.
Right, so there's either two things. The doctors can't say what they want to really tell you to do because the FDA rules tells them not to do it, right? Or they can't tell you what you really need to do because insurance won't pay for it.
Right, that's true.
And the whole insurance business is a scam because they passed this law for insurance, right? That said, we're gonna cap insurance profits at 15%. Okay,
right.
So, Congress in infinite wisdom said, oh, that's a great way to keep prices under control. Guess what? So what insurance companies do? Well, if my profits are 15%, so if the bill is $100, that means I can only make 15 cents or $15, right? So wait a minute, why don't we just raise the prices of everything? So if the bill is $1,000, I make $150. If the bill is $10,000, I make $1,500. And that's why medical procedures in the U.S. cost like 10 times more than anywhere else in the world because every year, right, they want to keep pushing the prices up so that their profitability keeps increasing.
Exactly.